Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on Workpapers in Simple Fund 360. I'm Emily, and I'll be taking you through the session today. So we are near the end of our education week with only a few more sessions to go. So if you would like to revisit any of these topics, I'll leave a link to our YouTube playlist in the chat box. So that's where you can rewatch any of these recordings at any time. So wealth of resources are available to you at your fingertips. I'll also leave a link to where you can register for the upcoming webinars. So we have one more being held later on today. So that is on digital signing. And our last two sessions are being held tomorrow. So that's with the distribution tax automation screen and T-bar management. So those two links, they are now in the chat box. And before we delve into today's session, we just have some housekeeping matters. So first thing to note is that all attendees are on listen-only mode today. But if you have any questions, please let us know in the Q&A function, which you can find on the bottom of your Zoom application. So here with me is Daniel, Norman, and Anthony from the training team. So you may already be familiar with them from the webinars in the past few days. We also have Jimmy, Vince, and Cody, and Luke and Zen from the BGL team. So they've dedicated their time today. So definitely ask your questions at any time throughout today's session. And of course, this webinar today will be recorded, and you'll be able to find that recording in the YouTube playlist that I've just linked, as well as the BGL community. And just got a slide here that includes a link. So just keep in mind that the recordings will also be found at community.bglcorp.com. And I will also send a copy of the slides to all registered attendees after today's webinar. All right, so here is what we'll be covering today. So we'll be looking to get your fund ready for audit, and we all know how time-consuming that can be. So I'll be demonstrating how you can easily generate work papers as a preparer in Simple Fund 360. So that includes not only just uploading documents, but also recognizing warnings and observations provided by the system to essentially help you along the way. And we'll also look at this from the reviewer's perspective, where you can adjust work paper settings, set checklist items, and we'll also look at the filters available as well, just to help us in terms of tracking and managing the status of a work paper. And throughout it all, I'll show you tips such as how to bulk update, add notes, and export work papers and documents. And hopefully by the end of today's session, you'll be able to prepare and review those work papers quicker than you did before. So now, before we start using work papers, what we want to ensure is that we've invited relevant users to Simple Fund 360, such as those who are preparing the work papers and the reviewers. And you can even invite the auditor to your license. And with that, you can manage role settings just to ensure that those that have access to your license has the appropriate permissions to access certain features and functions. So let's have a look at how this is done. So directly in Simple Fund 360, on the left-hand side menu, navigate to Settings and select Invite New User. So if you have administration rights, you'll be able to proceed with sending out invitations and managing user access. But from the screen, it is as simple as inputting their email address, allocating a user role, and assigning the entities. And upon selecting Invite User, that user will then get an email with a link to join the license. Now, what's important as well is to look at role settings. So from the screen itself, navigate to admin on the left-hand side. And you should find role settings there. So there it is. So the application is Simple Fund 360. You can monitor user roles across different users, and you can even custom make a role. So with the auditor, for example, I can toggle on or off certain functions depending on what I like to provide access for. And what you need to look out for is just down below the Workpapers functions. So whether you like to provide view and edit access, or simply change the Workpaper settings, so we will discuss this shortly, or to enable users just to read the Workpaper settings or the Workpapers functions. So this is read-only access. So this might be relevant for the auditor, where rather than enabling the option to edit, they can simply just view the Workpaper screen, and that includes the ledger and the relevant document uploads. All right, so let's have a look at the Workpaper screen. So it's why you've joined this webinar today. So I'm just going to simply head back into Simple Fund 360. And now navigating to reports on the left-hand side menu and selecting Workpapers from here. So if this is your first time on the screen, you will see the option to generate Workpapers. So clicking that icon here. And I'm just going to generate Workpapers for the 2022 financial year. And you can actually prepare Workpapers at any point in time. So whether it is at the start of the year or after create entries, you can prepare Workpapers for the prior financial years and even the next year as well. So this could be useful for uploading documents as they come through, even if you are still in the current year of processing. So I'm just going to hit 2022 for this particular fund. The start date is just going to be the date you first start working on these Workpapers. So that will default to today's date. The due date is when you'd expect those Workpapers to be completed, and that will default to be 1 week from now, but I can make changes to the dates as well. And down below, selecting the preparer and reviewer. And these contacts, they feed in from those users that have been invited to the license. So if those users have access to your Simple Fund 360, you will be able to select them from this dropdown. And just to let you know as well, the preparer and reviewer, it isn't fixed. So you do have the option to change them at a later point in time. So let's generate these Workpapers for the 2022 financial year. And here you'll see our trial balance. And we will get a display of the current year balance. And I don't have a last year balance for this fund, so it is in its first year of processing. So the change here, it is 100% as there is no last year balance. Now, it's just important to remember that the ledger produced will reflect the Workpapers generated today. So all of these balances here, they are effective upon generating those Workpapers. So that's what you see here on the top right-hand side. The balances were last updated to today's date. And I will show you later on today on how you can refresh those Workpapers or those balances. So you're not stuck on the screen. You can leave it at any time and process the fund accordingly. But if you do, I will show you later on how those balances can be updated. But as mentioned before, you can generate Workpapers for the next financial year or previous financial years. You can do so by selecting Generate Workpapers and then selecting the relevant financial year. And when you have multiple Workpapers generated, you can use the drop-down on the right-hand side to switch between them. So even if you haven't completed the current year, you can use the drop-down to switch between those Workpapers you've generated and start working on them. All right, so let's look at this from the preparer's perspective. And as the preparer, it is then up to us to go through these accounts and upload documents and ensure everything is checked. So in this example, we'll select the 23800 distributions received account. So selecting into that. And you'll notice as well that for across different accounts, the structure will be identical. So on the top here, we can see who the preparer is and who is the reviewer, and we have the flexibility to change it. And I will show you later on today on how you can bulk update that change across different accounts. Okay, so as part of the workflow, you would generally update the status to in progress, just to keep track of where you are as the preparer. You can find here that we've got the relevant sub-accounts that have a balance. And just to note as well, you will also find those accounts that have a zero balance as well. So that's where transactions have been posted to that account for the financial year. So at the moment, we just have one sub-account with a credit balance. Now, in terms of attaching documents, there are two ways that you can go about this. You can attach documents to the workpaper as a whole, and you can do so by selecting this green icon here. And the document itself will appear under supporting documents. Or you can attach the document against the sub-account, and can do so by selecting the paperclip icon on the right-hand side. So there is no right or wrong way of doing this. It really does depend on the account and the documents you are uploading. So for example, I have a tax statement for the GPT group, and so I can just go ahead and attach it against the sub-account. So from here, if you or someone else already uploaded the document to the document screen, you can easily attach it from here. So this could be useful for those documents that have been uploaded through a data feed as well. So a good example is the contract notes PDF from the contract notes service. So those documents will be automatically stored in the document screen, and you can find those relevant documents from this list as well. So we did host a webinar early this week that covered our newly renovated document screen. So feel free to check that recording if you wanted more information on that. Now I'm just going to go ahead and click to browse to locate that particular document, which is sitting in my downloads folder. And I can double click. And we don't have to wait for it to turn to 100%. We might be here for a while. So I'm just going to go ahead and click on upload and attach. And there it is there. So it's sitting against my sub-account. All right. And this document that I have uploaded, it will automatically be attached in the document screen against this particular account. Just to show you what it looks like, if I were to head into the document screen, you can see here we've got the tax statement that I've just uploaded. It's got the Workpaper tag, and it's against the 23800 folder. So it's neatly organized under that folder. And so there it is there. And so that's against the 2022 financial year. Okay. And so now heading back to the Workpaper screen, what I can just do then is I can tick the checkbox to the left of the account just to help track or help in keeping track of my progress. So now moving on, here we have supporting documents. So as mentioned before, so these are documents that you have attached to the Workpaper as a whole, and you can do so by clicking this green icon here. And you'll also find those relevant reports that will be automatically attached if it can be generated from Simple Fund 360. So I haven't uploaded this document beforehand or anything like that. The system has actually recognized that this report may be relevant to the 23800 distributions received account. So it's already gone ahead and done that step for me. And I will show you later on today on how you can add or remove the reports being attached to the screen. And that is done on a default and firm-wide level. Moving on, we have some warnings and observations. So this is just a program giving a tap on the shoulder and just letting you know of some key information based on the data in your fund. You can see here that we have a distribution that hasn't been reviewed, and it has a variance in our distribution tax automation screen. So what's great is that it's already provided a link as well. So I can click on that link and it'll take me straight to the tax automation screen. So my colleague Daniel will be running through this screen in tomorrow's webinar, so definitely register for that. But you can see here that we have a distribution still sitting in incomplete. So I'll need to ensure that the right tax information is accounted for, and once done, I can just go ahead and mark it as reviewed. Now, a good thing to let you know at this point is that anytime you are making a particular change outside of the Workpaper screen, it's always best to refresh the Workpapers. So if I were to now head back to the Workpaper screen, so whether you are editing or adding transactions or creating entries, the Workpapers will appear as you have initially generated them. So the balance won't update until you have refreshed Workpaper. So clicking that icon here, it's not going to delete the work you've already done. So the document uploads, it all stays the same. It's just going to simply update the balance. And you'll notice as well, and it states this on the confirmation message, but if you have a Workpaper that has been marked as completed or ready for review, and a balance of that account has been updated, the status will then be changed to a status called rework required. So that's just letting users know that there is an update and that needs to be looked at. So we're just going to click on OK. And you'll notice as well that besides that account, an update icon will appear. So that's to let users know that a balance has been changed. And I can go into that account and make any changes or upload more documents, which will remove that update icon. All right, so let's head back into this account and continue on. Okay, so down below, we have a standard checklist. So this is what the 23800 distributions received will typically require. So this checklist here, it will be different depending on the account you are on. And you can adjust this on a global level, and I will show you how to do that shortly. But essentially, we just need to ensure that all key criteria has been met in preparing these Workpapers. So I have attached the tax statement, so that's done. I've also attached the distribution reconciliation report, or the software has done it for me, so that's done as well. And we have reviewed the distributions in our tax automation screen, so that is also done. We can also add additional checklist items, and this is more specific to this account for the fund. So for example, I can put in ensure tax statements are filed, something like that, and we can click on add. All right, so finally, we have some notes. So this is where you can input any particular information for your users to see. So that is notes, any query items, or bringing a matter of attention to the manager or partner. And you can even select the account code it relates to. So I might just put in best boss ever. So hopefully I get a promotion out of this, but I'm just going to click on add note. And there is my note there. So you can see who has added the note. We've got a timestamp and can even edit or delete the note as well. Okay. And so generally, as part of the workflow, we can then change the status. So whether it is in query, if we're waiting for more information, I'm just going to change it to ready for review. And we can then use the blue right arrow to work through the rest of the Workpapers, or I can simply head back to the Workpapers dashboard. Now you would have noticed that there is no save button or anything like that. So the software does auto save it for you as you are making those changes. And any other users will automatically be able to see those changes as well. Now, once done preparing Workpapers, what you can do is you can notify the reviewer. So you can let them know that the entity is ready for review or rework is complete and review again. So this is just going to simply send an email to the reviewer that you have attached. So for example, if I were to click that option there, I'm just going to show you an example of what it will look like. So here, this is what the reviewer will see. They will get a notification, and it's just letting them know that Workpapers are ready for review, and they can log into Simple Fund 360 and access the Workpaper screen. All right, so let's look at this from the reviewer's perspective. So everything still stays the same. So you'll notice here, we've got some filters, and that's to filter for accounts that are in to-do, in progress, ready for review and complete. We've also got some filters on the right-hand side that sometimes people miss, and that is for accounts that have comments and warnings. So we can filter it for ready for review. And here we have the distributions received, and it's indicated that documents have been attached and comments have been added. And so I can simply head into that account. And so everything is still the same. So we can attach and view documents. So if I were to click on those particular links for the documents, a preview will appear on screen. And down below, we can see the checklist items and ensure everything is done. You can see one is missing here. And we can also see the notes and respond accordingly. So I might just respond back with a tax statement not filed. Please see me at my office. So something like that, and we can hit on reply. Okay, and so we can then change the status and we can say that it is now completed, or perhaps rework is required. And so we can then use the blue arrow to progress on, or just simply head back to the main dashboard. Okay, so as a reviewer, you might not want to go through every single account. So you might want to just look at key information. So in this case, what you can actually do is you can export Workpapers. So that's this icon right here, and I'll just go through the list right now. So the export Workpapers in this dropdown, it will export everything that you see in all accounts. So that is all supporting documents. It will also include your checklist items and any notes as well. Or you can simply just export just the notes by itself, or maybe the schedules only. So that is your Workpapers without the source documents. Or maybe you just want the source documents by itself. So that will download a zip file with all of the source documents attached across all of those accounts. And that will be particularly useful for the auditor. And we also have the option to export selected, and that is where you can export Workpapers for the accounts that you have selected. And that is all Workpapers, including supporting documents, checklist items, and the notes as well. Now with that as well, you do also have the option to bulk update. So simply selecting the relevant accounts, or maybe just all of the accounts, and you can bulk update the preparer, the reviewer, or maybe even change the status. So what I might just do is I'll just change the status to completed for all of the accounts. So that is now been updated. Okay, so the reviewer as well does have the option to notify the preparer. So they can let them know that rework is required, or maybe review is complete. So it is the same process as before. So the preparer will then get a notification through email. You can also notify the auditor that the fund is ready for audit. What you need to ensure is that the auditor is invited to your license and the auditor user role is assigned. So you can even head to settings on the left-hand side and select user list. So that is where you can make changes to the user roles. So just need to ensure that the auditor user role is assigned for that function to work. All right, so before we finish off, there are a few things to keep a note of. So just down below, you will find work papers that are not linked to a particular chart of account. So this relates to the fund as a whole, and it is very similar, except it does not have a table with a balance and sub-accounts. But you can attach documents and acknowledge the checklist items as well. And with permanent documents and estate planning, so the documents you do attach that will roll forward to the next financial year. So that could be particularly useful in terms of attaching the trust deed. Now, what I will show you as well is how to adjust the standard checklist and the supporting documents that are being uploaded by Simple Fund 360. So now heading back to the main home page, you will find settings on the right-hand side. So clicking that option there, so this is where you can customize the Workpapers pack across SMSF, trust, company, and individual. So those are supported with Simple Invest 360. So Workpapers, it is also available for these entities, and the same rules apply. But of course, there will be differences in the chart of accounts. And so when you are making adjustments to settings, this is applied on a firm level. So for example, if I were to go into the 23800 distributions received for an SMSF, I can go ahead and delete the report, or I can add other reports that can be generated from Simple Fund 360. So as long as you're able to generate them from the software, you can attach it here. And I can also change the checklist items. So where I can add any other checklist items. So I can put in file distributions as an example and click on add. So this will be applied to all funds across all financial years. Right? We can always revert the change that we have applied, or I can even head back to the system default version. And once done, hit save. And just very important after this is to head back to the Workpapers page and simply hit refresh Workpapers. So once again, where you are making any particular change, whether it is to the transactions, create entries, or even with Workpaper settings, just click refresh Workpapers to update the ledger. And you can see here that with my new checklist item, we have an update icon. So I'll need to head back to the distributions received account and proceed accordingly. All right, so that is Workpapers for you. It is very simple to use, and it's going to help greatly in reducing the time spent in getting your fund ready for audit. So that's where you can upload documents, add notes and checklist items. The reviewer can then check back. And as mentioned before, you just need to invite these users to access the changes made in the Workpaper screen. And it's also worthwhile checking their role settings as well. All right. So with that comes to the end of today's webinar. So hopefully today's session has encouraged you to go digital with your Workpapers, and hopefully you never have to go back to paper. But all right, so that looks like that's an end of questions. So I'll be closing the webinar there. Thank you all once again for your time and for attending, and I hope to see you all again at a later webinar. Thanks.